all of these things go together. They're not separate from one another. And I think that's where maybe a lot of people misunderstand, you know, what happens when you come to CRZ or you become a member in CRZ or anything else. And then went forward with a bike that was custom made to fit me specifically. And that's when the glass ceiling broke. That's when everything really, really changed. When you come to CRZ and you get a Walser titanium frame, you get something that no one else offers, and that is the opportunity to be taught how to ride your bike. Yeah, so you were asking me like when I started biking. Well, I mean, my love for biking started a long time ago. I think my first bike was a Raleigh, BMX style bike. You know, actually that's not true. I had a banana seat Schwinn, like I think everybody else did, that we did all kinds of trying to convert it into something else. Then eventually I was able to get a Raleigh. I was always jealous of my friends that had like Mongoose, Redline, things like that. Those were really popular BMX bikes back in the day in Hawaii. And yeah, so that was how we'd ride all over the place trying to find new dirt tracks. We'd make our own jumps, you know, all kinds of things. So constantly getting into trouble on our BMX bikes, but having fun, you know, and that's where I fell in love with cycling. Cycling then was freedom. You know, it meant that I could go anywhere, do anything, be with my friends. We'd go on long rides for a BMX bike, you know. I mean, it was really fun and, you know, and exciting. And that's really what it was all about. I think my first road bike was a Greg LeMond, actually triathlon bike that I was able to buy used because a friend of mine had asked me if I wanted to join him in this Tin Man race, which is a kind of a precursor to Ironman. And but I said, yeah, let's go for it. And so we did that. And that was when I got first introduced to road bikes, and totally different mindset, of course, different everything, different gear, different mentality, you know, the whole 9 yards. But from there was kind of a big gap. You know, I was a competitive football player, and then I went in college, I found rugby and things like that. And it wasn't until I got married and I was living in Colorado where I got into mountain biking. Mountain biking, you know, right in the early stages where bikes were still really clunky and heavy. I bought, again, a used Specialized rock hopper and had a Marzocchi shock on it that had horrible elastomer, you know, shock absorption and things like that. I think I blew through those shocks in the first season I rode. But that was where I really fell in love with a different kind of riding altogether, where I was riding with buddies and we were really trying to best one another all the time. But you get into that cycle of every year there's another model, every year there's another upgrade, every year there's something to do there. And, you know, you find yourself on this sort of like hamster wheel, just chasing. And so I really looked at the sport and saw it for what it was. You know, I mean, for me, it was always about, you know, how fast could I go, how far could I climb, what kind of jumps could I take on my bike, you know, those kinds of things. And, you know, I tried to get as much out of it as I could. I rode everywhere. I rode in Wyoming. I rode in Colorado. I rode in Utah. You know, I mean, I would take my bike everywhere that I could to ride. I got my kids into BMX bikes around that time. My oldest son was racing in the National Bicycle League, NBL. And, you know, so we were a biking family. And so that was awesome. It wasn't until I moved actually back out of, you know, kind of like that type of stuff, where I got back into road biking. And the first bike I bought was this bike that I just like pined over at the store forever, but it was a Ridley X-Fire. And, you know, it was a cross bike. And so it had a few components that I was excited about because I was always a big guy. And so I knew if I was going to be on a full carbon frame, that I had to be on a pretty robust carbon frame in the important areas. And for me, Ridley seemed to put more into certain areas that were important to me. And so that's why I focused on that. So yeah, Ridley was the kind of the bike brand, I guess you could say, that I fell in love with. And then it was kind of the same thing. I mean, you have a new Ridley every single year, right? And they're always working hard, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But you have something new to look forward to every single year from the manufacturer. And what I realized was they weren't getting any cheaper either, right? So you're buying this brand, the bike, and you're rebuying it and rebuying it. And so you start to think about, at what point am I going to get a return on that next level? I think one of the things, like, I get asked, how much does my bike weigh? I honestly don't know. I know it's probably more than 8.5 kilos. It might be even over 9 kilos. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think about weight the way I think a lot of people think about weight, because I'm already, I fluctuate between 85 and 90 kilos as a rule. And so I'm not a small person. And, for me, 100 grams or 200 grams or even half a kilo, I can do that on my own better than I can get my bike to do it for a lot less money. And so I don't necessarily think about weight as being my primary concern on the bike. Of course, the heavier a bike is, the more work you put in to make it move, but that's why I don't think about it. Flash forward to just the past few years, right? I mean, everyone here knows me now as like the Tank, but before there was Tank, there was just a passionate cyclist. And during the pandemic, I had the opportunity to get a road bike, because I only had a mountain bike. My friend, a very good dear friend of mine named Nick, Australian guy, he had his own road bike, a Cervelo. And so we went on a few rides during the pandemic, and of course he would leave me behind because I was on a much slower bike. And so I decided, let's get a road bike. But none of the bike shops are open, so I just had to find someone on Facebook that was selling a bike. And so I got a Ridley Phoenix. It was the best thing I could find that was in my budget at the time. And so got the Phoenix. Right away, there were a couple little things that I could make some changes on, but got into road biking. And that was fun, and that was exciting. But I got to a point where there was only so much that I could do. Like, we would go climbing in Sierra Madre and things like that, and there's just so much that I could do to where, I would literally get off the bike on a climb. Now, it's not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, even still today, we just did Mount Banoi, and there were times when I stepped off the bike then too. But, that's steep and whatnot. Back in the older days, during the pandemic and stuff, I was getting off the bike because I was gassed. I mean, I couldn't handle it anymore. My legs were on fire. My heart rate was screaming. And, it was like, wow, there's a lot going on here. And normally, if you go into a bike shop and you say, these are the things I'm experiencing, they go, oh, well, you need to go get a bike fit. Now, I agree with that. There's definitely a component to fitting on the bike that makes sense. But that doesn't help you in terms of your physical capabilities when you're out on the road riding. That definitely helps you when you think about how I fit on the bike and everything else, right? And then you go out and you have to apply all of these principles and everything. So anyway, I think when I started thinking about that was when I started looking around at some other options. And that's how I ended up finding cruise control. I think my story's pretty well known at this point, but I reached out to Coach Cruz on Facebook. A couple days later, we met for the first time, and ended up doing, my biomechanics session, which I think more than 3 million people have seen now on Facebook, which is just crazy. But it was like mind-blowing, right? And it wasn't mind-blowing because, like there was some crazy thing that happened. It was just understanding more about how my body actually works and what muscles work when you're pedaling and doing all of those kinds of things, and why my posture mattered when I wasn't even considering that as an issue, why my pedal stroke mattered when I wasn't even considering that as an issue. At the time, all I thought about was just my position on the bike as it related to me physically, right? And what I was introduced to was this other thing about learning how to ride my bike as it pertained to my posture, as it pertained to my pedaling stroke, as it pertained to my position on the bike. all of these things go together. They're not separate from one another. And I think that's where maybe a lot of people misunderstand, you know, what happens when you come to CRZ or you become a member in CRZ or anything else. And then the next step from there was when I got on my first Walzer. So the first bike that I got that ever in my life that had been made to measure was my first Walzer, and titanium bike, and I had it set up in a more of a classic style, because that's what appealed to my eye at the time. And you know, at that point, kind of the rest is history. But what I realized was, even though I had all of these other things, I had been working on my posture, I had also been working on my nutrition, and I had also been practicing the technique that we're all taught at CRZ. You know, I still had one limitation, and that limitation was tied specifically to the bike itself in terms of not fitting me. So I went as far as I could on a bike that didn't actually fit me, no matter what I did to the stem or the seat or any of those other things, and then went forward with a bike that was custom made to fit me specifically. And that's when the glass ceiling broke. That's when everything really, really changed. And you know, I think some of my posts probably have shared, you know, that I've been in several crashes, some of them like unbelievable crashes, and I've never, ever, ever had an issue with my bike. I've gotten flat tires, yes. I've broken a few chains along the way. I've peeled some cogs and things like that off my rear cassette, but I've never hurt my bike. And I think that's a testament to the strength of titanium. I think everyone knows that I'm very strong, so I put the bike through its paces. There's no question about that. I've used the same frame on gravel. I've used the same frame on road. I've used the same frame in Ironman, you know, things like that. So, but I think what I always go back to in terms of my understanding is, when you come to CRZ and you get a Walzer titanium frame, you get something that no one else offers, and that is the opportunity to be taught how to ride your bike. And I think this is a huge, huge difference. The industry loves to sell bikes, absolutely. The industry loves to sell you components for your bike, absolutely. But the industry never teaches you how to ride your bike. That's usually left up to yourself. And so one of the things that we do at CRZ is every single person that gets a titanium bike, a Walzer, they get to go through a program where they get to be taught how to ride their bike, posture, technique, and then out on the road. That's where you're going to enjoy yourself. So if you're out on the road riding the bike, you know, whether you're climbing, whether you're on flats, whether you're doing all, you know, whatever those disciplines are, that's where you actually need the most help, right? And learning how to do that makes all the difference in the world. So I think if you're considering a Walzer and you're considering CRZ, know that those two things come together. You're going to get a fantastic product, high quality in terms of frame construction and weight and all of those other things, everything you would expect from a handmade titanium bike. And then you're also going to get world-class instruction on how to ride that bike, how to be better on your bike, how to have a great posture, how to get the most out of your body. And then if you want to go to those next levels, it's all available to you. And I think that's why I am who I am. I know that if there's no Walzer titanium in my life, there's probably not really a tank. And so I'm pretty stoked on that. And yeah, it's been a great trip for sure. So if you see me on the road and you want to know about the titanium bike, I'm never going to be shy. I love this thing to pieces. It's my favorite bike for sure. And I don't know that I see myself ever changing. So yeah, good stuff.